On this episode of China Unscripted, the Belt and Road Initiative is spreading around the world, but it's a new type of communist colonialism, and it could put us all in debt to China. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley John.
And I'm Matt Ganeshta.
And joining us today is Dr. Rachel Winston, author of, many books, the latest being Diplomacy with Chinese Characteristics and Belts and Roads Under Beijing Thumbs. Singular thumb. I think Beijing only has one thumb.
But it's an iron thumb.
Yeah. When will we get behind the iron thumb?
Yeah.
So now that we've established how smart we are, Dr. Rachel Winston, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, so I know your background originally was sort of more in education. How did you get interested in China?
I started traveling to schools in China and speaking at schools. And then I did an MBA program where I went to school partly in China. And then I went to Harvard and started studying China's economy. And that kind of, the ball started rolling. And I found it so fascinating that the China that I knew when I was a child was not the China that was coming up today. It was a very different China.
Well, so what do you mean? What was the difference that you saw?
When my father was with the United Nations, and he was the director of one of the branches of the United Nations, and so I grew up around international politics. And I mean, you didn't go to China, you didn't visit China, you didn't fly to China. It was a place that was off limits. You really didn't know what was going on there, but whatever it was, the people were really poor, and the cities were not developed, and it wasn't a place where we even considered going, and we traveled all over the world. So then when I was teaching college and I retired, then I said, I need to know more about this country that is growing so fast that we all should be aware of what's happening. And I needed to be more aware because I didn't know enough.
Well, yeah, I think what's interesting is you've already had like a very rich career. You started college when you were 13. You have multiple degrees in many fields. You've taught many fields. And then after all of this, you decided, let's look at China. And I imagined it sounds like at the beginning you sort of kind of had sort of the more rosy view of, what China is today, because obviously you went from a country that, you couldn't travel to infrastructure, high-speed rails. So what was that change of thought like? So
when I went to Shanghai, I was like, wow, these buildings are beautiful. And then I went to Guiyang, and I went to Hangguoshu Falls, and I went to Xi'an. I went all over China, and everywhere I went, it was big, beautiful, developed, and art. And you go to Los Angeles, because I live near Los Angeles. I mean, it doesn't look like parts of China.
It's a hellscape.
I was like, I would rather live there in China than here. In fact, we have our favorite hotel. I didn't tell you this, but I live in a hotel 24/7. I don't have a house or an apartment, and I haven't had one for a very long time. So I live in a hotel. So we have our favorite hotels in China in every city. And I don't think I can go back and live in any of them anymore. But I don't think I'd risk my life. But I found China remarkably different than the China that I had expected, except on the outside, it looks so beautiful, but on the inside, it's very dangerous. So I was really fascinated by how a country could turn around like that.
When did you start realizing that it was dangerous?
I think it's when I started working with businesses in China. Some of the people that I worked with talked about cooperation. Their favorite word is, we're going to cooperate.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounded great. Win-win. They would say win-win. It's going to be great for both of us. But actually, it never happened that way. Some of the people took my picture, my bio, everything, put it on their website and said that I worked with them, but I never worked with them. And after a number of experiences like that, that didn't stop me. One of the people that I met with at a hotel in Shanghai was a CCP military officer. It was a woman. She was one of the scariest people I've ever seen in my life. I was talking to her daughter, but she stood right over top of us in her military outfit. And I was like, am I going to get out of this hotel alive? I mean, I was really afraid for my life, and I needed to know more. But when really, it was Xinjiang that did it for me. It was, how do we have concentration camps today? I don't understand that. I went to Dachau in 1972. It said never again. And how is never again mean that we have not just one, but we have hundreds of concentration camps? And it was really the concentration camps that got me trying to understand more about China's policies and why they would do this.
Well, why did you want to focus on the Belt and Road? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't really know much about.
So my thesis at Harvard and the University of Chicago were both surrounded about the South China Sea, because what was happening in the South China Sea was unconscionable. And I didn't understand why the United States didn't protect Scarborough Shoal. Like, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I read the Mutual Defense Treaty, and I didn't understand that.
Just to give some quick background for the audience, because that's an important event. Scarborough Shoal was claimed by the Philippines and China. Chinese essentially sent their Coast Guard in to occupy the shoal. Philippines and China looked like they were really going to go to blows over that. The U.S. stepped in and said, just both sides leave. The Philippine side left, the Chinese side stayed and occupies it till this day. And the Philippines has a mutual defense treaty with the United States, and the fact that the U.S. just kind of let this happen, it had shockwaves in Southeast Asia for a long time. So continue, please.
So, once I started reading about Scarborough Shoal, then I realized that China had taken other islands long before that. And they were threatening others. And I think I was attracted by, words like, wolf warrior, salami slicing, these kinds of things that were like, wow, what are they doing? So my first book was Raging Waters in the South China Sea. The problem was, when I got there, I was like, what is happening in India? Like, is China going to India or Bhutan or like Nepal? Like, why are they doing this, taking all these other countries? So then I got into China's power grab and expanding claims. That was my second book. So I was really just in Asia, but Africa kept on, pulling me. Like, what is China doing in Africa? And so I wrote Belt and Road under Beijing's thumb, but the book was just so long. It was so long. It was like 550 pages, and I almost 600 pages. And I just split the book in two. I was like, something? We can't, people are not going to read like that long of a book. So I split into, and I made it into Diplomacy with Chinese Characteristics and Belt and Road under Beijing's thumb. So really, those two were written at the same time. They were one book until I cleaved them apart. Like
Kill Bill Part 1 and 2.
Yeah. Or, Wolf Warrior Wolf Warrior 1 and 2, right?
Has China made that movie?
There's multiple Wolf
but
Warriors.
Specifically called Wolf. Oh yeah, it is called Wolf Warrior. That's where it came from.
The whole thing came from Wolf Warrior. You forgot.
Yeah, I forgot. It's just so in the lexicon now.
You should watch it. I watched that movie just because I was curious, and I found it really quite fascinating how countries use propaganda through film to get their people, excited about nationalism and everything. So I found the movie really interesting. They have subtitles. It's obviously in Mandarin, but
they've been doing that a long time. I know a big thing is like these anti-Japanese movies, because the state has so many censorship requirements for their film industry, they basically are stuck making films about World War II and why the Japanese are evil. And like some of the things are insane, like a Chinese soldier throwing a grenade into the air to blow up a Japanese jet or plane.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they've been. I remember watching some from like the 1930s.
Going way back.
Going way back, like this type of. Well, that would have been still under the nationalists, but kind of starting in the 40s and 50s, there was a lot of these like red movies, right?
Yeah,
where you have the at the time it was more glorifying the party, but now nobody really wants to watch them as much, so they have to kind of turn into nationalism. So they're doing the kind of the 1980s America type of movie, Rambo, Top Gun.
I saw one where a Chinese soldier literally ripped a Japanese soldier in half with his bare hands.
I believe that was historically accurate.
Yes, that's World War II. It was a bloody hard war.
But the only part that's a lie would have been if it was a communist soldier who did it.
Yeah, because the communists actually weren't really fighting the Japanese forces.
Anyway, where
yes.
Oh yeah, Africa.
Africa.
So wolf warrior diplomacy, Africa. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, because if you're talking about the Belt and Road, Africa inevitably comes up.
Yeah, I mean, they were surprisingly, Mao went into Africa really early in his administration. They've been in Africa for quite a while. They built the Tazara line in the 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. Yeah. So it's been half a century for sure that they've been there. So we kind of think that a lot of these contracts in the Belt and Road Initiative, and now China has 140 countries signed on with the Belt and Road Initiative, 140 of them. This isn't one, this isn't like a couple of countries. There are 140. And so in Africa, China needs resources. They need minerals. They need energy. They don't have these natural resources. And so the best thing to do was to go into countries that could provide them with the minerals that they needed in order to produce or manufacture products. And they're doing it more so now than before.
And it's not just about the minerals. It's, if ever you need proof that China is trying to create an alternative world order to compete against the United States, Belt and Road, 140 countries. They're creating this alternate sphere of influence that also ties into Chinese military expansion. We'll get into some of the digital Belt and Road stuff as well, but also about, surrounding India, for instance, and eliminating competition to the Chinese Communist Party world order.
Certainly the string of pearls, the Indo-Pacific is important. But I think another thing that we don't think about quite often is how China is inserting people into United Nations organizations. They have a member on the Human Rights Committee. The Human Rights Committee, can you believe it? And how they're doing that is if they have a country that can't pay their debt, they owe China. And so it's very easy. You are going to vote with us, tell the United Nations that we should have China or a proxy serve on these committees so that we can have China-friendly policies. And I think we're going to see more of the United Nations turn into a China-friendly organization.
Yeah. I mean, I would say
saw that with the WHO.
I would say you definitely had that before Belt and Road, but it's definitely increased more and more, not just in the UN, but also, ASEAN, the EU, all of these international bodies. And what's interesting, too, is you don't even have to be a country that's in debt to China. As long as you've signed a Belt and Road agreement with them, there's a certain expectation that you're going to align with China's politics, right? Otherwise, they'll be unhappy with you. You're not cooperating.
I think, 140 countries, like that's more than 2/3 of the countries, right? There's about 200, depending on what you call a country, right? And so essentially China now has influence over more than 2/3 of the world's votes in the world's only important governing body. That's terrifying.
It's terrifying. I think everybody should be terrified. And yet I don't think the media or people really are aware that there's this tidal wave, and you can see the tidal wave, and it's right over top of us.
But the tidal wave is promising win-win mutual cooperation.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think people are ignoring this?
China took the opportunity for through the pandemic to engage with countries all over the world, and nobody is thinking about that, because we're all thinking about our health, our fate, our vaccines, whether we're going to go to school. The changes in political environment are taking precedent in the media, rather than really, guys, you should worry about this, because it's not a person who's an alarmist. I'm not an alarmist. I'm just a regular citizen. I live in Southern California. I am just awakened to information that I think people should know. And the reason you saw my book, the reason why my books are all colorful, they have pictures in it. And if you don't know where Laos is, fine, there's a map. If you don't know where the Caspian Sea is, fine, there's a map. I made every book so that it was like, I don't want to say a children's book, but it was like a book that you could actually read, that you don't have to know anything ahead of time. I explain social credit by showing you how the social credit works. So everything is in pictures.
I really appreciated it, actually. I like the colors in the pictures. Colors and pictures are great. Come on, who needs all those words?
I mean, I think there are plenty of words in the book.
There are plenty of words.
Yeah. I mean, I can't read, which is why I do videos.
Oh my God, guys.
Guys, don't rope me into that.
You're laughing about that, but the truth is that people need what you do. They need videos because it's easier for them to turn on a video or a podcast or something and watch it than to sit down for a long period of time and read thousands and thousands of words of text. And I'm aware of that, but Matt, I don't have your skills. So I haven't created these videos, but the best I could do is to create books with writing that's understandable and pictures so that I show you exactly where you were talking about digital, where the digital, Silk Road is, where China's ports are. This is where China's airports are. All over the world, you can see where there's piracy. Here are the latest pirate attacks. I actually have pictures that show little pirate boats.
It's great. Do you think you did that? Do you think you did that because you have so many years in education and teaching, like that gave you a certain perspective?
Yeah. I taught math for 35 years. People ask me every time, why is X plus X 2X? I don't know. Why is 1 apple plus 1 apple 2 apples? And, not to be sarcastic to them, because I wasn't. I answered the question every single time, realizing that it's this, it's just another person who doesn't know. It's fine, right? But given that, if they can't see that, this is at universities, right? I retired from, colleges and universities, right? They need to see it. So I drew pictures. I was a big picture person. So when I found people who they said, I don't want to read a long article like that. It's too complicated. Part of the complication is if you don't know where Fiery Cross Reef is or where Scarborough Shoal is, it's very difficult to read about Scarborough Shoal, right? Where are the paracels? Where are the Spratlys? You can talk about this, but unless you show a picture, that's why I love what you guys do. Seriously, like you talk and then you have a picture. You show what, Matt, this is back to your videoing, right? They can actually see what you are trying to say. But people who were reading a book, they want to know this information as well, but they can't see it. And so I drew pictures.
Well, so hold on, just to get a little clarification. How is an X an apple?
That's good. Well, you can take a class from me and I'll go through the whole reason why the integral of 1 over x is the natural log of the absolute value of x plus c.
Yeah, I understood that.
A new show. Math unexplained.
Math
ununderstood.
unrepentant.
No, like
it can be about like
math undivided,
making fractals by hand
like
on the complex plane or something. Those are because they're pretty, right? You know what I'm talking about. I can't read, but I can do math.
You can see it, right?
Yeah, fractals are pretty.
They are.
As are your books. But so to get a slightly more hinged, so it's interesting. At the start of 2020, it seemed like the Belt and Road was getting bad press. It seemed like, like countries like Malaysia were beginning to fight back against a lot of these predatory Belt and Road loans. X equals Apple. But then the coronavirus happened. How did that change things for Xi Jinping's Belt and Road plan?
As soon as 2020 happened, China went into the South China Sea and stopped oil exploration, stopped countries from building on their islands, started moving into countries. And that's not specifically Belt and Road, but China thinks of itself as the manufacturing capital of the world. Anyone who needs something manufactured, come to us because we're going to be the product distributor. They needed these trains not to help other countries. They needed the trains so that they could deliver all of their products to all of these places. And so there were all of these deliveries of face masks and PPE and ventilators and so on, continuously using the Belt and Road to transport materials that were needed by countries to all of these locations that shut down. Now, China didn't really shut down in the same way. They had their workers working despite the virus. Oh, yeah. They didn't have a virus in China, I remember. They don't have any deaths there. So they just had everybody continue to work. And same thing with the maritime Silk Road. They needed their ships traveling. And so their Belt and Road was the avenue for face mask diplomacy and vaccine diplomacy and all of their other kinds of diplomacies that they sent around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about also them going into the South China Sea, because it was kind of like when everybody was distracted, right? They were going to the South China Sea. They were starting this border conflict with India where they were encroaching on this territory. And it was like they were thinking, well, now's a good time for this.
It's a good time to build the concentration camps in Xinjiang, right? It's a great time to take more of Bhutan's land. I mean, they literally built Chinese villages on the other side of the border. Little just creeping in every country, taking a little bit more. They have a military base in Tajikistan, everywhere around. They said, we're your benefactors. We have money. We will help you. I don't know if you did a video on this, but they had these bars of gold that they were using to secure their money. It was lots of gold. And the gold was actually not gold at all. So I'm not sure how much money China really has. I'm sure that because they have produced things for all over the world, they have lots of money, but they told countries everywhere, we will help you. We know that you're having a really hard time and we know that, you're financially unstable, but we can give you money. I don't know where the United States thinks it's going to just pick up, a few $1 trillion here or there. I mean, as if we have forgotten what dollars means, right? So I think, but everybody thinks that money grows on trees. So that's why everybody in the United States has their hand out to get, money, free money, right? Isn't that great? So China didn't just offer to give money to, loan money to the United States. They offered to loan money all over the world. Of course, there was a requirement that you help China out whenever China needed it.
And what's interesting to me that a lot of these Belt and Road deals, that were announced were very, they're often really it's going to be hundreds of $millions in this country or, billions of dollars in Africa, this kind of thing. And then when it gets down to brass tacks, it seems like a lot of these projects kind of disappear. They don't actually
the
happen.
money never
Or
shows
they
up.
start and they peter out
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
So that happened with the Philippines. So my focus really for quite a few years was just on the Philippines, because the Philippines fascinated me for quite a number of reasons. In part because Benigno Aquino and Duterte are such different personalities, and how that happened is just fascinating. So China, when Duterte was, before Duterte was elected, China offered the Philippines $26 billion. They haven't gotten that money. This is 4 years later because Duterte took office in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't gotten the money. They just made these promises. And if you look at the pictures of what China drew for what Manila could possibly look like, it is phenomenal. If you fly to Shanghai and you say, wow, that's really beautiful, can you do that for my country? And so you come back to Manila and you go, wow, little tuk-tuks here and, very narrow roads here. And, we're going to build this magnificent city that is just as beautiful as Shanghai. Those specs are amazing. Nothing happened. China did not give that money to the Philippines. It was just promises. But Duterte, he was strung along like a leash, like he was on a leash. And China was like, here, I'll give you something. But he gave him nothing. He didn't give him anything. Right. And just, he wants him to give over his islands and his oil. That's what he wants.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Duterte had actually run when he was campaigning. He campaigned on this standing up to China platform, famously saying that he would ride a jet ski out to the Scarborough Shoal to defend the Philippines' claim. Later, he said that was hyperbole.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, actually, it's almost like a politician didn't follow through. But then, yeah, it was like he campaigned on this stand up to China platform, and then very quickly he moved towards China and away from the United States. But yet, despite ditching the U.S. as the long-term partner, Duterte really didn't get what he was promised for his country. So that's going to obviously, at some point, people in the Philippines are going to be like, wait a second, this just didn't work.
It's okay. He doesn't have to run for re-election.
That's right. They only get one term.
Yeah.
Well, he's trying to get his daughter, Sarah, to take over his place.
Oh, really?
So, so we'll see what that happens. She's the mayor of Davao, right, where he was a mayor. And so she's a mayor now, and he's trying to get her to become the president. So we'll see what happens with that.
So we might have the Duterte dynasty.
You had the Aquino dynasty, Cory Aquino and Benigno, and we have it here, H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, and I think it's nice to have a legacy where a tiny group of elite people run a supposedly democratic country.
Well, I think what's interesting about what you were saying is sort of how people around the world are enthralled by these Chinese megacities. They see that, it's like, oh wow, what a functional society China must be. Please tell us how we can do that. But the reality is those cities exist because they exist in an authoritarian regime where the state owns all the land, is able to control every aspect of the economy to funnel it into any kind of insane construction they want. It's not something that can be replicated in other parts of the world without that same kind of authoritarian system.
For sure. Well, going back to what Shelley was saying about the islands, and what happened right after the pandemic or during the pandemic, China went and tried to take another island, Whitsun Reef, hung outside of Whitsun Reef with hundreds of boats, thinking, we're ready to take your island. They said they were parked because it was a storm. What a cockamamie. Like, really, you must work really hard, China, to come up with these like fabulous stories that make no sense, since there wasn't a storm and they were all tied up right outside of the reef. I mean, Duterte had to do something to get those boats away from there. And this is what China does. It gets really close and it says, are you really gonna, you don't want to have a war, do you? We're gonna get really close and we're gonna snatch this island. And unless they push back, China will take the island.
Which they actually call it the Scarborough Model, named after what they did in the Scarborough Shoal, because I don't think they really expected at the time that they could get away with that. And when it turned out they could, hey, new foreign policy.
But they didn't have to get away with it. I mean, the United States could have gone, Barack Obama had this negotiation. China was supposed to leave. The United States could have gone in and said, you violated this. But just like the Alaska conversation with Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, you can promise 2 minutes and we'll take 15. This is your new model. Give me 2, I'll take 15. That's the China model.
It's like they say, if you give a mouse an island in the South China Sea,
he'll ask for a glass of milk.
Yeah, that's how the story goes.
Okay.
I should write children's books.
Uh-huh.
Well, so let's also talk about a big focus of the Belt and Road is the digital aspect, the digital Belt and Road. And that ties into Chinese telecom Huawei, creating smart cities. This is sort of a big thing that they're doing in Africa. But, the United States has been trying to create a global pushback against Huawei. So why is this Huawei digital Belt and Road so significant to the Chinese Communist Party?
So if you can control all of what people say, just look at the United States. If you can control what people say, then you can stop them from saying anything that, this is authoritarianism 101. You can stop them from doing anything. Well, in Africa, for example, the biggest phone companies in Africa are now Chinese phone companies. And the reason why they're more likely to buy a Chinese phone is because China undercuts the price. So charges them less than it costs to even make the phone. Why would they do that? They want to do that because they want to have everybody to have a Chinese phone. They want to be on their system and they want them plugged into their internet so that they can listen. They built this big, like CIA, NSA type of place in Guizhou province. It's huge. It's massive. And they're collecting people's DNA. They're collecting their voice. They're collecting their records. As if they can take information from people all over the world and hold on to that information, they can control you.
Well, some people listening might be like, wait, they're taking our DNA, but like this has actually come out. The what was the name of the company with the prenatal tests?
BGI?
BGI, yeah. One of the most popular prenatal tests in the world. And that information goes back to China. They are collecting DNA from a lot of people around the world.
A lot of when COVID hit, BGI started going around to different countries offering PCR tests.
Kind of this vaccine Belt and Road.
And then they also offered to build testing facilities in country. They offered in the U.S., they offered California, a number of other states to build testing facilities for them. For PCR tests, and then the U.S. Federal government was like, do not take that. money.
So
You are
bad.
not allowed to. But if they hadn't stepped in, I mean, California bought $3 billion worth of masks from China. I mean, I don't see that they necessarily would have not accepted this Chinese, like bio.
Trojan horse.
Well, I wasn't going to say Trojan horse, but like this company, right, that has an interest in collecting all of this DNA data from the U.S. and other places, because like data is power now, and California might not have said no.
How about 23andMe, Ancestry.com? How much money? I always say, how much money is your life worth? Or your belief or your company worth? How much can I buy you for? If you give 23andMe or Ancestry.com billions more than they could possibly ever imagine in their lifetime, and China can do it easily, and then they have everybody's DNA that was sent into those agencies. Imagine it wouldn't be that difficult to get a lot more data. The question is who's going to stop them, and whether or not they can, take those deals or shuffle off some of that data underground so that people don't know. I would like to think that there isn't a price tag on my head, which is why I continue to write books, even though I know it's dangerous. But I know that there are other people who don't. I have people who have been around my office who will not have their name or information shown. They'll help me, but they will not. They don't want to be involved. They don't want China to know anything because they're afraid. And I think this is going to happen more and more. Once someone feels that their life is, or their family's life is in danger, they will no longer do anything or say anything against China, which is what's happening in Hollywood and what's happening in Silicon Valley. And, there are a lot of places where people are not willing to say anything against China.
This really is, it shows the terror of the alternate Chinese system that the Communist Party is trying to set up. I don't even want to call it Chinese. It's just a communist totalitarian state that's influencing the entire world. However, so the Belt and Road, on paper, it's this infrastructure investment project, and it is creating this horrible alternate system that, someday the Chinese Communist Party, you could use it to dominate the world. But at the same
someday.
Well, it's well on the way. But, a lot of the world does need infrastructure development. If China obviously was able to step into a market where there was a big need for it, why did this vacuum exist that the Chinese Communist Party was so able to exploit?
They can produce items cheaper than anyone else in the world. If you're using slave labor, it doesn't take a lot of math to figure out that if you have to pay someone $15, $20 an hour in the United States and it costs $0 an hour there, then it's a whole lot cheaper to produce something, right? So once you have that ability to manufacture at very reduced cost, and you're willing to take a hit, like we were talking about Africa, you're willing to sell phones to everybody in Africa for less than the cost of the phone. Or you probably read in the news this solar panels. So they're producing these solar panels that I guess are very difficult to produce. So doing it in Xinjiang, and they're selling them at less than the cost of making them, so that no other company wants to go into that market. You were saying a vacuum, but the vacuum is created because if China can get everybody out of the marketplace because they can undercut all other competitors, then there's a vacuum. Like they're the only one. They have a monopoly. And so they're trying to create monopolies in certain areas so that the other countries don't get involved in the manufacturing.
Which is possible because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't need to be accountable to the Chinese people. Like we just did an episode recently about the dams that have been breaking in China after the recent flooding. And we quoted one official who was saying that most dams in China are old and in desperate need of repairs, but there's just no money to do that. However, there is what's the Belt and Road price tag? $4 trillion?
I mean, that's not real.
That's not real,
but I mean,
but it's in the hundreds of billions.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not like the United States where like every time there's any amount of foreign aid, you get like a bunch of people saying, hey, why are we sending money to a foreign country?
Right. I mean, also, what you were talking about with the undercutting with the phones or the solar panels, they do with infrastructure as well. They will go in and bid on a port in Greece and offer much lower, like they'll offer a higher price. They will do it for less than, or they will bring in and operate it for less than anybody else. Like they will basically make it so that financially they are the only choice.
Yeah. I mean, when you were in Greece, the port of Piraeus, the whole they'd taken
over half of it
yeah.
by that point. But yeah. But like a Chinese company came in and it was a stand-up company and they were like, we can run this. And Greece gave them a really long lease for it. And they were like, they brought in Chinese workers.
And undercut the Greek workers.
Yeah. And, but that meant that they could do it much more efficiently. The government didn't have to pay that much.
Yeah. And they didn't have to deal with like safety standards or like overtime. It's,
or environmental protections.
Yeah.
In a lot of countries, China's gone in and built these power plants and destroyed the rivers so people can't even use their rivers anymore. The same way it is in China. The rivers are you can't swim in China's rivers, but you can't swim in the rivers in a lot of other places either because China doesn't have any environmental protections. They say it's up to the country to handle the environment. We're just going to build these with all of the drainage and toxic waste going into the rivers. And this is a problem everywhere, Africa in particular, but, Hungary, I just read a report about the rivers in Hungary. It's just as bad there.
It's interesting, the river pollution is one example of an externality, right? It's like a company goes in and they take advantage of some aspect of the natural environment or the society or whatever that they don't pay for. But the true cost of production or development has these externalities, these spillovers into other aspects of the environment or society or politics, et cetera. So beyond just the river pollution, what are some of the other externalities that we see when Chinese companies come in and into Africa, undercut the local markets, and start to dominate in certain sectors?
I think, certainly the air, if we want to stay on the environmental side. But I'll take another one that's kind of interesting in the China-Pakistan economic corridor. So they've built this train from Xinjiang down to Gwadar. And in Gwadar, they have because they use all Chinese workers. In Gwadar, they have a Chinese, we'll call it encampment or city. And they created this barbed wire fence around like a chunk of the city where they had built living spaces for the Chinese. So another externality is that going into Africa, I gave the example of Pakistan, that little Chinese cities are being walled off inside another country that the country can no longer use because it's got 10,000 employees from China. And they don't want the Chinese to leave. So the reason why the barbed wire is not to protect the people, it's because the Chinese workers could try to leave, even though they do take their passport. To prevent them from escaping, they wall off the whole area, which makes the people in the country completely annoyed. Can you imagine if in your city, they walled off a place for 10,000 people and you weren't allowed to use your parks anymore or wherever, this was located?
Well, that reminds me of what happened in Cambodia, right? In Sinukville, where they had a bunch of like Chinese companies come in to do development. And then they basically created this kind of space where the Chinese mafia moved in because casinos moved in and then brought essentially terrible crime.
This sounds like Vancouver as well.
Yeah,
and human trafficking.
Yeah.
But also, interestingly, like in Sihanoukville in Cambodia, they're building casinos, but it's illegal in most cases for Cambodian people to gamble or to own casinos. And so they basically created the space where essentially there's a different jurisdiction, right? It's almost like a Chinese jurisdiction that's under kind of China's rules, run by China's enforcers, which in that case are basically the triads or the mafia that are generally controlled by the party, even though they're sort of on their own. And then approved by the corrupt dictator. In the case of Cambodia, Hun Sen is one of those presitators who is elected, and rules with way too much power. And so, like, just imagining this now in like Gwadar in Pakistan and like all over Africa and the countries that we can't even name because there's like.
I think South Africa had this controversy because they wanted Chinese police to come in to to kind of police some of these areas where there were basically these Chinatowns.
Oh,
and
that
so
sounds good.
they're state-owned companies, and then it was kind of, I don't remember all the details now because it's been a few years, but there was a big controversy over whether they didn't call it the Chinese police would come in, but they called it cooperation, right?
Oh, win-win mutual cooperation.
I love cooperation.
Where essentially these places could be under Chinese jurisdiction. What you're talking about.
Yeah.
Well, when you frame it like this, it suddenly the Belt and Road becomes very clear as to what it is. It's colonialism. It's Chinese communist colonialism.
So there are two things. One, if you think about Sri Lanka, China's gone in and tried to protect their investment in Sri Lanka. In Myanmar, so you follow the story in Myanmar. China had a bunch of businesses, manufacturing facilities in Myanmar, except some people attacked those Chinese businesses. And so China said, well, we need to bring in our military to protect our assets. And so this is happening really around the globe. There are American think tanks and advisors and stuff. I just want to have a conversation with them. Are you kidding? They say, well, there's only one military base, and China only has one military base outside of China, and it's Djibouti. Okay, really? What planet are you on? In every one of these countries where the people in the country were not so happy about having China take over big swatches of land and move all these Chinese people in, China moved their military in to protect their investment.
What are some specific cities or ports where there's evidence of the Chinese military actually being there, just so the audience gets an idea of how widespread this is?
Well, for sure, Sri Lanka, because they've taken over lots of Sri Lanka's beach area, right?
Right. I mean, they've got the port Hambantota, which they somehow got a 99-year lease on after Sri Lanka couldn't pay its bills for the Belt and Road.
That's not the only port they have in Sri Lanka. So the string of pearls is Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Oman, Pakistan, Seychelles, Maldives, Kenya, Djibouti. They may not have a full-blown base, but they have military that are protecting their assets. This is kind of the same thing with the
maritime militia.
The maritime militia. They say, oh, well, China has fewer ships than us. Okay, I guess maybe fewer like really big ones. But if you have 17,000 distant water fleet, 17,000 boats that are militarized all around the planet, it's way more than any other country, maybe combined.
Just because they have, they're giant and have reinforced hulls and the people on board carry weapons doesn't mean they're military ships, right? I mean, they're just normal fishing boats.
Well, so this is the challenge of talking about the Chinese Communist Party. There is no separation between like private Chinese companies and the Chinese state. That also means there's really it's a blurry line between any company and the Chinese military. So there's always this sort of like plausible deniability they have. But because the lines are so blurred, really everything ties back to the Chinese Communist Party making decisions. And the military of China isn't the military of China, it's the armed wing of the Chinese Communist Party itself.
The United States is deceiving the American people in saying that we are the strongest, meanest, baddest, military, and we've got all of these facilities and everything. I mean, you probably read the report of the nuclear facilities that China's now building.
Oh, the new silos, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing more of that. So, but I mean, the shipping alone, just boating alone, when you look at a Philippine fishing vessel, they say, "Oh well, the Chinese fishing vessel and the Philippine fishing vessel are right next to each other." Like, yeah, the Philippine fishing vessel looks like a tugboat, or like I saw you on one of those Philippine fishing vessels, so I know you know what that's like. And then there's this China massive, like militarized ship. I mean, you can't compare one to another.
Yeah, for the record, when I was standing on that little Filipino fishing boat looking at the huge Chinese boats at the Scarborough Shoal, I was not scared.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, so we've definitely established that the Belt and Road is sort of this communist colonialism plan that's really creating a alternate global system to challenge the United States. But there is one major advantage the United States has, which is the U.S. dollar. Even most Belt and Road projects are done using U.S. dollars. However, and I know you're shaking your head because it's a chapter out of your book, China's push to get a digital currency. Tell us about that and how that really is like the final nail in the coffin, I guess.
China's goal, its stated goal, is to replace the dollar with the RMB. So, and it's not surprising that they want to do this with a digital yuan, right? So why would we want to take dollars to use for our projects when we can take our own money? And besides, the IMF declared that the RMB was a perfectly legitimate kind of money to be used for IMF projects. Really? Like, really? I mean, and one thing you haven't talked about at all, and that is the Arctic. China's gone into the Arctic because it calls itself a near Arctic state. It's in the Arctic and it's in Antarctica, but 30% of all the oil is in the poles, in the Arctic. And China's gone in there calling itself a near Arctic state and says it's going to be a polar power. They're not even at the poles. They got themselves on the Arctic Council in 2013. And they're taking over the Arctic as well. This is because it's a shorter route. The Northern Sea route is shorter to get to Europe. And so China's really got its fingers in a lot of pies right now. Digital yuan is one, and that will spread for sure. I don't think that there's a doubt as to whether or not the digital yuan will make its a real challenge to the U.S. dollar.
Right. So about the digital yuan, the U.S. has a fiat currency that's no longer backed by gold, and China has a fiat currency that's not backed by gold. What makes China's currency less legitimate than the U.S. currency?
Transparency. That's the best word I can use. There's no transparency in China. They cover everything. They do not share any information. You don't know what happened with the coronavirus. We won't ever know what happened with the coronavirus. We really don't know about a lot of their systems, and we don't know about the contracts that China's made with countries like in Africa. That's because they have a system that says don't tell, or else you'll regret it for the rest of your lives.
Right. So do we have data on like the Chinese money supply?
No, we don't have data on, we only have China's data. But China doesn't provide transparent data to anyone, just like the what happened with the coronavirus. I don't know what happened, so I'm not I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just saying we don't know, we won't know, but I can tell you I have friends that are in China right now, and they had more deaths than you thought, right? They don't share this information, and that's the problem with having a digital yuan that surpasses or supplants the US dollar.
What's a problem a country can get into if they either adapt the digital yuan directly, or if they start say pegging their currency to the digital yuan, or use it as a base for their own currency? Like what's a specific issue they could run into that they're not getting into now?
China controls them. They can move the money. They can change the value of their currency. You could, on a small level, and it's not a financial level in the same way, is if you think about Angola during the pandemic. Angola had all this oil, and China had these loans to Angola. And during the pandemic, the oil prices dropped, right? So this is kind of gives you an idea of this digital yuan scenario. The oil prices dropped, and that meant that Angola owed China so much more oil than they owed before, right? So if the price of oil drops in half, they owe twice as much oil to China. And this kind of happened with the prices of a lot of commodities during the pandemic. China raked in because their debt payments that were in resources were given back to China in spades. So if China changes its currency, then they can control what the prices are.
Well, that would be terrifying if 140 countries were all reliant on Chinese currency.
That would be. And we don't really have any kind of recourse. Like we talk a lot, but we don't. We're really being bullied pretty well now. The wolf warriors and their propaganda team. I said this, to someone. I always try to think of what job would I want to have, since I could really kind of do anything. But I thought, I can create good, sayings. You want wolf warrior? I'll do something like really creative, and I'll get a bunch of people and. Give me a team at NSA, where my ex-husband used to work, or CIA, and give me a team, and I can do what the wolf warriors do. Now they have millions of, they have thousands of people, but I did apply to be an advisor to the administration. I didn't get that position, but I don't know that I give up my work. I kind of like my work, but I was thinking, what would be like, how could I use my knowledge to help? You do a great job in what, but I'm just me, right? So I don't have, like all of you to do that. So I have some valuable people who support me, but there's some kind of pushback that needs to happen by people who can come up with really good messages that can help explain what the United States or what citizens need to do and what's happening in China.
See, this whole time I was actually imagining you as the star in the next Jack Ryan movie.
As a CIA analyst.
Yeah.
For a CIA analyst, he sure gets into a lot of
trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. But if you do have contacts at the CIA, for us as a team that's supposedly funded by the CIA, we haven't seen a single dollar. So if you can make some calls for us.
We are not actually asking for money from the CIA. It's a joke.
It is a joke.
Well, I did work on Capitol Hill, and I worked for President Reagan. So, a long time ago, I did get involved with politics for a while. And then I decided, just to be a college professor. And now I'm a mentor to young people to help. I always say, Isaac Newton once said, if I see so far, it's because I stand on the shoulders of giants. And I can only hope that I can be that giant that other people stand on. so that they can see farther. Because I was born in the 50s. I mean, I'm not young like you guys, right? I just want to be able to do what a good citizen should do by making people aware.
Yeah, and we like to stand on the shoulders of giants too. Like, for example, someone like you who's actually really smart and writes, all these books, and then we just rip off your material by presenting it on our podcast.
Yeah, well, you're welcome to do that. In fact, you're welcome to take anything from my books and put it anywhere you like. So that's an offer, because I'm not, Amazon pays me $2 for every book I sell. Like, literally, they pay me $2. So like, I'm not making money at this. I'm doing this because I feel like I have a duty as a citizen to do this, right? So I don't understand how Amazon can only pay me $2 per book, but that's the way it is. And so if you want to take the anything that I have in my books, you're welcome to.
Well, I think that's what's interesting about what you have chosen to do, because obviously, to a great extent, like most people, especially in the United States, don't really know about what China is doing or the Belt and Road. This is kind of a failure of not just the media, but politicians as well. And you have made the choice to focus so much on writing these books specifically geared towards sort of the average American. So why do you think that is the key?
Because we don't why? Why? Because the Beijing Olympics are coming in 2022. Because no one really knows why 180 human rights groups have called for the boycott of the Olympics. They just don't understand it. Why? Because if China goes into Taiwan and takes Taiwan, and they take the Senkaku Islands on the way, we have a mutual defense treaty with Japan. We're in there too. So this is the very real possibility that we could all be at war is greater than people think. And yet nobody knows why. People don't understand what these treaties actually mean, and they don't understand what would happen if Taiwan fell, right? Just watching the microcosm of Hong Kong is just horrifying. I mean, if I could meet Agnes Chow, I'd probably just break down crying. Like, can you imagine that you have all this hope for Hong Kong, and you are, multiple languages like you, and then you're just put in jail, right? Why? Because you want to be free? I don't understand that. I don't think anybody in the United States understands that either. This is the problem, because if we can't reach the average person to understand why we may be engaged in a war, whether it's the South China Sea with the Philippines, whether it's because of Japan or anywhere else, that the hotbed, it says raging waters, but the hotbed, my book says raging waters, but the hotbed is really, South China Sea and East China Sea, and it's dangerous right now. And the danger is on all of these people that have no idea what is happening in the world. And if I could get people to read a book, because there are lots of pictures and because it's just easy enough to read, I would love that. I would love them to read any part of it. I have a really good chapter on piracy that I think, people would think is really fascinating, on where the pirates went and why, how China's protecting its manufacturing resources in the maritime Silk Road because of this piracy. But there are things that people could latch onto and be interested in. So I'm going to find every single little, that's really curious thing, like social credit. Social credit's fascinating to me. I mean, I could read about social credit forever. Really, you're going to go in and you're going to follow everything that's on my phone, track everywhere that I've been, and you're going to give me demerits, or you're going to give me positive vibes, because you're not going to let me get on a train because I let my dog poop on the park. Really? I don't really understand this. Social credit, if we ever had anything like that, or it moved to other countries, this is back to your digital Silk Road. It's really dangerous how much control a country could have, an authoritarian country could have, if they control everything that you say and do. Your phone tells you where you are. Right this minute, I'm in Palm Desert. Though I don't always live here, but I told you I live in a hotel. So wherever I am, that's where I am. But right now, my phone knows exactly where I am. Imagine that we have that kind of control over a person where they can't use their money. You want to go back to that digital currency? Here we go. If your social credit score goes down, you can't access your money. This is where it's really a problem. Your money is all digital. If it's digital, you can't get to your money because in China, they control whether or not you can get the money out of your bank account. I can only imagine what's happened to, Jack Ma, who were silenced or whatever you want to call it. You can't get access to all the money you have. You can be the wealthiest person in the world. I'm not going to crawl into a silo and get my, bags of nuts. I'm not ready to do that. But I do think that there are threats to our world and we should be aware of them. And the regular person should be too, because we could have a war and their kids are going to be in that war.
I mean, you brought up Jack Ma, and some of the financial stuff just blows my mind, because the one thing that we can do right now to the Chinese Communist Party is essentially starve them of capital. The digital yuan is not a thing yet that's accepted in 140 countries. Before it is, they need the US dollar. And they're pretty obviously desperate for US dollars, the way that they're kind of wooing Wall Street and trying to, keep companies in China from being able to list outside, make them list inside China so all the money goes in there. The one thing we can do right now is to try to not give them that leverage of giving them money, but we seem to be just pumping it in.
Well, we're doing it on, avenues like TikTok and other places that are owned by China too. We're buying China's products. This dress that I have may have been made in Italy, except it was made in a Chinese company that the Chinese company moved to Italy so that they could call it made in Italy, right? So, let us not deceive ourselves. China has big manufacturing places in Italy just so they can call it made in Italy.
That's why the New York Times had the article, "Invest in China, but without illusions."
Well, in your neck of the woods, one of the, heartbreaking stories is the 13 tons of human hair that came into the New York Port Authority. And that was just one time. We don't know how many times this has happened, but I actually, in the book, I multiply how many heads of hair from the Uyghur Muslims had to be cut in order to have 13 tons of hair. And yet people are actually wearing that hair. I'm sorry. Every time I see hair extensions, I get the creeps, right? I don't know. You should all get the creeps. So you were talking about feeding or starving China. We starve them by not buying their product.
Well, so then once again, I guess the solution is to check out your books, Diplomacy with Chinese Characteristics and Belt and Roads Under Beijing's Thumb. And if anyone wanted to follow you or learn more about your work, where should they go?
My website is southchinaseabook.com. And I have another one that is awakennow.com. And I have that because my next set of books are on genocide, Nazi Germany to Xinjiang, China. And the third book is the Uyghur persecution. So that's my next series of books. So that's at awakennow.com. And if you, my email address is rwinston@uchicago.edu. Went to University of Chicago. Love the school, 100%. But yeah, email me. I have social media, but I actually have, I don't even know what those sites are. So I can send you information.
And just one last question for my own sake. Started college at 13, multiple undergraduate and graduate degrees. You taught in a bunch of things, a bunch of books. You studied publishing so you could publish books. How do you do that? Coffee only gets you so far.
Adrenaline.
Where can I buy that?
if you have a passion for what you do, you wake up every day and you say, you know something, I'm going to make the most of today. And when the pandemic happened, I said, this is a blessing. Blessing is that I now have time to quarantine and not go out and do anything else. I'm just going to stay here and write books. And actually, I didn't just write those 4 books. I wrote 2 other books. One of them is From High School to Medical School. I know. And the other one is on medical school and dental school education admissions. So that's my other side of my life is college admissions. But so, I mean, I just hunkered down and, I don't eat anything different. I drink a lot of water. So I just know that I have a purpose in life. I'm not a college professor anymore, so I'm kind of on my own. And I can write and publish as much good data, good information that's backed up by sources as I can to help people understand the issues of the world.
Well, thank you very much for joining us and sharing this information.
Thank you. And I hope you have a great day.
Well, that was a mind-blowing interview to me. I mean, X is Apple?
I knew you were going to go back to that.
Never watch a triple Apple movie.
Oh.
Hey, that's pretty good.
No, I want to be able to still eat apples. Stop it.
Why would you not be able to eat an apple? Because you've associated with Vin Diesel.
Okay, yeah. Well, no, that's fine. He just creeps me out a little.
Never turn your back on apples.
I've actually never watched a Vin Diesel movie.
You've never seen any of the Fast and Furious?
I've never seen any of the
Chronicles
Fast and
of Riddick is art.
Wait, didn't you and I, Chris, go to see one of the Fast and Furious ones?
No, I think we were on a plane together and you watched one.
Oh, is that what happened? That's
Possibly.
kind of together. Okay.
Chronicles of Riddick.
That's not a Fast and Furious movie. But
no, but it's a Vin Diesel one. You keep what you kill. It's great.
Right. I'm not sure I trust your movie recommendation.
It's
what are the categories?
Oh, the Happiness of the Categories.
That was a great movie.
Yeah, well, we started watching that together, and like after 20 minutes, I just couldn't.
Yeah, because you have poor taste.
Yeah. Although when we watched The Room together, that was legit.
I liked it when our friend Thomas just left the room in disgust after the movie was over. He just didn't say anything. He left.
He couldn't handle being in a room after seeing The Room.
There you go.
I also like how, we just have had an interview with like a genius and we have devolved back to
like pop
Vin
culture,
Diesel. Yeah.
Vin Diesel.
Well, Tommy Wiseau was a genius from a certain point of view, right?
In the kind of Obi-Wan Kenobi, I'm not going to lie to you about who your father is from a certain point of view kind of thing. Yeah. From a certain point of view. Tommy Wiseau is a genius.
Yeah, I mean, don't you ever feel like, I'm fed up with this world? I did the accent wrong.
We are not going to be writing books.
Or making movies, or possibly ever being on camera again. Shelley just can't.
Well, I, for one, apologize for how disastrous the conclusion to this episode has become.
I think we're just processing, right? Like, we've just talked about something that's really heavy, about China taking over the world through the Belt and Road Initiative. So now we need something to kind of release that energy.
That's why I'm going to go watch some Hermitcraft videos.
I thought you were going to say a Vin Diesel movie.
Yeah.
Maybe I should.
Time to watch Fast and Furious 17.
That will be filmed entirely in Shanghai.
Yes.
Everything's great here in Shanghai. We don't have to drive fast. Or be furious. Thank you for watching.
If you're still watching.
I hope you come back another time. I swear we'll be better by then. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And while I make no such promises, I'm Matt Gnezda.
You make no promises about being Matt Gnezda?
Stop. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
This is not my fault.